In high school, there were subjects that I really loved, and then there were subjects that I just disliked. History was one of those that I really did not like. I could not understand why the names of wars and their corresponding dates written on a chalkboard, so that we would memorize them, of course, had any relevance at all to my naive little life in small life Canada. Sorry, mistake, Canada. It made no sense to me. It was only decades later that I realized the content wasn't the problem. The lack of context was. Over time, I learned that using words that link context and connection is everything. Our existence today will have little meaning for us if we don't understand the way language is used to leverage power. If we fail to connect what we're seeing and living today with what's already happened previously. Our existence today will have little meaning if we don't understand how a given society has evolved and then recognize where it's repeating something historically familiar, potentially treacherous. And if we can't see that our life has any purpose or impact on where we are and where we're headed. In his 2017 book, On Tyranny, 20 Lessons for the 20th Century, Yale historian Timothy Snyder lists 20 parallels between what happened in the 20th century and what we're living today. His concise historical analysis gives comprehensive insight into what we are currently experiencing. And in my opinion, Snyder is an historian like few others. If I can become fascinated with history, given my early beginnings, I think anyone can. And I highly recommend this book for anyone who's concerned about where we are today, where our culture is, and where we see this direction going. The book is available in paperback, large print, ebook, graphic novel, and as an audiobook with reading time of under 2 hours. And all formats are available through your public library or in a bookstore of your choice. And that is the end of my commercial for you this morning. So anyway, the lessons that Snyder discusses in this book include emphases from things like do not obey in advance, to make eye contact and small talk, to be calm when the unthinkable happens. Lesson 9 of this book is entitled, Be Kind to Our Language. Snyder urges his readers to, and I quote, avoid pronouncing the very phrases everyone else does. Think of your own way to speak, even to convey those things that everyone else is saying, end quote. And he goes on to explain how much repeated language can create a reality that is inaccurate or one which people really don't understand. For example, the phrase, the people. The people is used often. Now, mind you, it doesn't mean all people, it means certain people. Or persecution is confused with being held to account. You'll recognize us as a nation in every one of these lessons. Be kind to our language. Think about how frequently used words such as woke or the woke agenda or CRT or cancel culture are used. All are examples of how people repeat a word or a phrase long enough and then they create a high-octane agenda around that without clarifying the definition or where these concepts appear in culture, if at all. Authoritarianism relies on conformity to its language. Snyder uses words like helping us to understand that our own words are very important. He says, use your own words. I think a little bit like we help toddlers when they're screaming, we say, now use your words, helping them to learn to express what they're feeling. So use your own words. What Snyder means is to take the time to define, in your own words, a trend that you're seeing. To avoid merely sharing social media content in a moment of agitation when you feel people not like yourself need to hear that without giving thought to exactly what it is you're saying or what those words mean. So Snyder invites us, express your words differently. Let them be, I don't know, Roger or Eileen or Nancy or Steve or David words, not repeating politically motivated phrases coined to manipulate the masses. Let them be your own words. Your own words are tools for resistance to what threatens us today, a few of which are authoritarianism, polarization, marginalization, and disinformation. So what's all that got to do with our text? Let's begin with the end of the passage that Rossi read and move backward from there. The final lines of this text contain a list which gives clues into what a disciplined and resistant mindset is, what that looks like. And the writer urges, wake up from your sleep, climb out of your coffins, basically meaning get back into life. Christ will show you light. Watch your step. Use your head. Make the most of every chance you get. These are desperate times. And I think if a list like that doesn't get your attention, we're going to have to start serving some coffee in here. But in other words, the writer of this letter is calling us to be awake, alive, illuminated, agile, alert, flexible, astute. Every one of these characteristics bring chills to those who wish for the masses to conform and to walk in lockstep. An unwillingness or an inability to harness our minds and our words can have devastating results for our personal, mental, and spiritual health and for our culture's survival. Listen to this historical description. There was a 90-year period of political instability and social unrest that culminated in the demise of the existing rule of law and led to the advent of the empire. The causes and attributes of this crisis changed throughout the decades, including what forms of slavery were used, wars, both internal and external, overwhelming corruption, land reform, the invention of new and humiliating punishments, even changes to the composition of the army. Well, that reads a little like a modern-day news article, doesn't it? But it's actually a description of Rome and its territories during the time that the Apostle Paul wrote this letter from a prison to the church in Ephesus. The verses that Rossi read are part of this longer letter. So this is the historical context within which to understand today's scripture. And to me, it sounds eerily similar to our modern context. In light of this, Paul chose clear, strong language as a call to action, to wake up, to stop being naive, and to be intentionally thinking decisive human beings. If we're unable or unwilling to make tangible choices to develop these characteristics, we are swept along. We're lulled by entertainment, numbed or overwhelmed by our own mundane, paralyzing realities and routines. The writer calls that useless work, mere busy work, the barren pursuits of darkness. Of course, we assume that our lives aren't defined by pursuits of darkness. And in this context, darkness could be substituted with cover-ups, distortions, disinformation, deception. and by extrapolation, allowing this darkness to continue places us into that camp of darkness as well. By this I mean being unconcerned about and avoiding thinking about cover-ups and distortions and so on. We also have a hand in the state of affairs, in our own lives definitely, in our city, in our nation, and beyond. Okay, so that's the negative spin. To see our role positively, we choose to align with the light of Christ rather than the pursuits of darkness. And in words that we understand, it sounds something like this. We refuse to participate in cover-ups or live in denial and ignorance. Instead, we welcome and search for truth in all of its forms. And isn't truth ultimately another way to understand the light of Christ? There are people all around us who live in light. Elizabeth told us of a number of them, powerful stories of living in light. Those who live on purpose, making the most of every opportunity. Those are modern-day resistors. Those are individuals we can and we should call upon to inspire us more. Thank you for that inspiration that you gave us this morning. So I would ask the rest of you, who are your inspiring people? People whom you see living on purpose, making the most of every opportunity. People who are resistors in their own right. Maybe it's a Malaysian-born actress who worked for years and overcame all odds to win an Oscar. Maybe it's someone who fights against injustice even when they know they'll land in prison or may even face death. Maybe it's someone who says, what we're doing isn't enough. We can do more. I'm sure every one of us can point to someone whom we hold up as an inspiration to be better, to do more, and to persevere. For me, it's the Iranian women who, when Mahsa Amini was arrested by the governmental morality police and then later died in their custody, these women took to the streets en masse to protest for freedom in spite of the brutally oppressive regime. For me, it's Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, a brave leader who refused the easy road of escape, but chooses daily to be present and relentlessly supportive of his citizens and his warriors, who takes it upon himself to educate the world, who influences global rhetoric to focus on building instead of destruction, perseverance instead of defeat, accountability instead of passivity. For me, it's Timothy Snyder who speaks and writes and lectures and travels tirelessly to gain and then to pass along accurate historical information so we can distinguish truth from deception. For me, it's local leaders such as Bitwise's CEO Irma Alguin Jr., who raises a city's discourse from, it can't happen in Fresno, to, there is a way. We can and we must do better by Fresno. It's not about who we want to be, but how we want to be. Who are the people who inspire you to new levels of purpose and responsiveness? Take the time to identify them. These are the people who help us to wake up from our sleep, to be alive, to live in integrity, to inspire and guide us to make the most of every opportunity, and even to create new opportunities. But it's our choice. It is always a choice. These are examples of how you do it. This is how we can show up. This is how we faithfully live this kind of a scriptural text and many, many others. Resistance is central to the lives of Christ followers. Jesus is our primary example of that. Some acts and attitudes carry great weight and are revolutionary. Some are small, steady, almost stealthy, yet they change the fabric of life. My spiritual director said recently, by not allowing the culture to get inside of us or becoming a part of our DNA, we are engaged in spiritual work. It's prayer, she said. Jesus also often called prayer vigilance, seeing, being awake. The people I mentioned are modern-day prophets, illuminating the way. The people who came to your minds as you thought about individuals who shift your perspective fit into this category of prophet as well. The people who sit among us right here, who do ordinary yet transformative, transformational work, do as well. I challenge each of us to be clear-minded, level-headed, to use understandable, original language, not to default to the words intentionally introduced and then thoughtlessly repeated, thereby allowing the broad perception of what is real to be altered. I challenge us all to be resistors by not conforming to how things have always been or have always been expressed, nor necessarily to how things are and are expressed now. There's no default switch. Our ability to discern and choose are a sacred gift. I challenge us all to consider how living on purpose, consciously and thoughtfully, can and will contribute to increased mental and spiritual health. Becoming mindful and taking stock will always have a positive result. I challenge us all to consider the impact that small changes can have in how we view ourselves, our colleagues or classmates, our congregation, our city, our nation, and far beyond. Any amount of change will result in enormous impact over time. A former colleague of mine, who also happened to own a boat, once explained how incremental change works. To change a course by 1 degree, he said, shifts your destination by 1 nautical mile after your vessel is 60 nautical miles from point of origin. So 1 degree equals 1 mile after 60 miles. Equally, 1 incremental change undertaken today and sustained over time will have profound impact on outcomes in your life and in the lives around you. To build a life lived in resistance, think about where you are today, what adjustments are needed, tweaks or bigger adjustments, and where these adjustments will lead to over time. May we make the most of every opportunity that we get, and may God help us.